I'm at the center.
We're with you in the field today. We want to be people who are known, not just figuratively in the field, and not just literally for landscape's sake to be in the field, but we want to be known as people in the field, involved in the work of the gospel, and it is a work.
It is. We want to make it our intention to be available. We want to make it our intention through our study to be as effective as we humanly can be, but we want really for the Lord to give the increase. That's where you, out there in viewing land, you're going to be experiencing something of the Holy Spirit's pull on you, on your inner man, while we are speaking. And it's not because of whatever efforts we are putting into this. It's because of the operation and the work of the Holy Spirit. We're just available. Are you available?
Our wish is to bring you outside with us, figuratively speaking. We're going to start where we left off in the last teaching on Acts. From the Ascension, we're going to start off basically with the day of Pentecost. They were in no church, so to speak. They were not, yes, they were in a building in the upper room that was definitely described, but we want you to know that church, or the gathering of believers, is not just restricted to,
confined
to a building.
Right.
We're in God's cathedral here. What better place? You know, I've preached outside many times with different settings, from scouts to cowboys to, who knows. But the fact is, the Spirit of God is in us as believers. Mm-hmm. Matt, I, you.
If you're a believer.
If you're a believer. I want to make that clear about believers. And so on the day of Pentecost, when the church, as we know it in the New Testament, started, they were in no certain place other than they were in specifically the upper room, but it wasn't just that place that was holy that day.
Oh, right.
Because it immediately spread outside of there.
Let me give just a little bit of background or context, even from the words of Genesis. The beginning, when we have Genesis chapter 1 and the creation, what we see there is that I subscribe to the view that what God is doing when He is creating the world and the universe is that He is making a temple for Himself. God is creating a place for Him to dwell. And so we have, as it were, the earth is the temple. Outer space then would be considered the outer courts. In the temple, there's going to be this Holy of Holies, an inner sanctorium, and that is to say, Eden. God was making for Himself a temple in the universe, a cosmic temple. He comes then to inhabit and indwell the temple, just as He does with the tabernacle, just as He does with the brick and mortar temple of Solomon. Yes. And then the second one as well that was post Ezra and Nehemiah. But God makes for Himself a temple, and then He makes for Himself an image, a likeness that bears His likeness, for lack of a better word, and He puts Him, a living, breathing statue, into this garden, this inner sanctorium, the Holy of Holies, and His job then is to be High King. His job is to be the high priest. His job is to be the administrator. He is to look after the temple. He is to cultivate or keep or guard the temple, the inner part in the Garden of Eden. And so here is this image, and there's a problem. God's temple almost immediately becomes polluted. The creation rises up in Satan, the serpent. Creation, a creature, a critter, rises up and stands the whole system on its head. The creature was supposed to be under Adam's reign and rule. Man and woman were both created for the purpose of ruling and reigning properly over God's good creation, his temple. The serpent, creature, shows up and then talks to Eve, who is, please understand, subordinate in terms of position. They are ontologically equal. Man and woman are ontologically equal, just as, quick note, just as God the Father and God the Son are ontologically equal. They're both to be understood as being God. But Jesus is in the subordinate position to God the Father. They're not less than equal, but the Father is in the position and the Son is in the position. So positionally speaking, it goes God to man, particularly the male man, the Adam, then the female man, Eve, then creation. Creation rises up and says, you can be like God if only you'll listen and obey me. Eve goes back to the husband then also taking of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, goes against God's command, and now God has been put on the bottom of the totem pole, if you'll allow me the use of those words. They listened to the serpent, creation, they obeyed him. The whole thing has been stood on its head. It should be God is sovereign and superior over all things. Suzerain and vassal king is Adam. Adam is then the head over the woman, Eve, and they then are head over creation, ruling over fish, birds, creeping things, beasts, cattle. So the whole thing gets stood on its head. You can be like God if you'll obey me. And then Adam listens to the woman, and then Adam says that he wants to be like God also, and God then is somewhat pushed out of his own temple, at least in those terms. Unfortunately, it doesn't work precisely as everybody had maybe hoped, and so what we see is that this whole temple defying, or temple defiling is the word I was looking for, I'm sorry. This whole temple defiling is actually being undone at Pentecost. The temple in Jerusalem was intended to be a picture, an illustration, an image of what it was that God was doing. The temple becomes a picture of God dwelling with man in the cosmos, and this high priest, the king is the one who owns the temple, the high priest is the one who administers in the temple, and those are both the positions of the original Adam. Jesus comes to be the new Adam, to be the high priest, to be the true king, and so now doing that, he is actually no longer just simply going to be having a throne on earth. He ascends to go take his throne in heaven, at the right hand of God the Father, to be the human administrator over all of creation. He's in control. And so then he, by his choice, sends the Holy Spirit to the human followers, Peter, John, the followers that are there in Acts chapter 2. And what happens is a counter-temple movement. We do not depend on the brick-and-mortar temple to show us the presence of God or to experience the presence of God. No longer is there a need to come to the temple to be in the presence of God, but rather the presence of God comes directly to the believer and into the believer and through the believer. And now the cosmos is not enough to hold all of God, but that very God is the one who comes and indwells the believer. So we now have a remove of part of the curse of Adam brought about by the new Adam, Jesus Christ, and man is being fixed. Man is being corrected and is being made properly the seat of God's blessing, and it will begin to work out from there, not just in this place where we are, the temple, where the temple is, Jerusalem, but also Judea, also Samaria, also the uttermost parts of the world, and the cosmos is being, if you will, reclaimed through this Pentecost movement of the giving of the Holy Spirit. So the giving of the Holy Spirit is a revisitation, if you will, back to, or at least toward the direction of bringing back that initial move of God to inhabit a space with his creation, his mankind, made in his image and in his likeness, now being perfected through the presence of himself in the Holy Spirit.
God has engaged the fix for sin.
Yes.
He's already did that. He's put that in motion through the man Jesus Christ, who is God himself. And now we're in the inauguration of the church, the believers infilling, which sets into motion the fix for the problem of sin.
Right.
Before this, Matt, as you well know, there was no fix for sin.
Right.
Before this, yes, there was a premeditated cure, as in Jesus Christ, a premeditated inoculation in Jesus Christ. They knew that there was hope, and that there was hope of that because of God's dealing with men, because of prophets, because of writings, because of the Spirit of God working with believers alongside of people who believe this hope. Therefore, we've come these thousands of years to this time of inauguration. Heaven coming back to earth, if you will, if I can use that loosely. Now, we have been given the antidote for sin in Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit. As Jesus has ascended, he said, I will leave that antidote in the Holy Spirit, who now does not just come and work just with us, he works inside of us.
Through us.
Dwells in us. Lives out day to day, even as we sleep. Right. He is working in us. Right. In our psyche, however complex that is, he never rests, never sleeps, nor does he need to. Right. So now, on this day of Pentecost, God has sent these signs and wonders to the people who are there expecting it. They're not just there just having a prayer meeting, Brother Matt. Mm-hmm. They're not. Yes, they are there because Jesus told them to be there. They are there praying, but they don't know exactly what's going to happen. It could be, in their minds, they may be thinking, we're just going to feel really good and empowered,
They know something's coming because he tells them, you don't do nothing. You stay here until the power comes. And then, so they know something's coming, but they don't have any idea of the full extent of this until it happens.
Because the supernatural essence of this...
Don't go any further that way.
Because of the supernatural essence of this, we do see extraordinary signs that happen. One of the first things that it mentions in Acts chapter 1, Acts chapter 2, let's just go there.
Well, you were right. One of the first things that happens is the commissioning.
Yes,
and that is extraordinary. That is extraordinary. The witnessing, that is extraordinary. That is beyond the ordinary, to be sure. But it's not the limit.
And you can access a more in-depth teaching on ascension in a previous taping that we have. And there will be more to come also, maybe in certain areas, specific areas for you.
Yeah.
So when the day of Pentecost had arrived, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like that of a violent rushing wind came from heaven. And it filled the whole house where they were staying, and tongues like flames of fire that were divided appeared to them and rested on each of them. Then they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began speaking in different languages as the Spirit gave them ability for speech. Elaborate more on some of these happenings, these initial happenings, Matt. By elaboration, I mean it doesn't say there was a rushing mighty wind.
No, right. And yet,
As in blow your hat off.
right. There was, but there was perceived something akin to it. And I would say that there may very well be an echo to be heard here with John
Yes.
the Baptist having said, there's one who will baptize you in the Spirit and with fire. And now it's not just precisely the same, and I know that, but I suppose that there may be an echo being heard if you listen carefully to that, because wind and spirit, the more popular word for wind and spirit both are pneumatos. However, I don't want to go too far with that, but I want to say there are those precursors that give some indication that this isn't just simply coming about willy-nilly, that this is something that was expected and was understood.
And if I may interject while Matt's turning pages, this pneumatos is the direct translation of the ruach in the Old Testament, the same thing, spirit, wind, breath. Yeah. Same definition of pneumatos in the New Testament Greek.
Yeah.
Same meanings, prescription to words.
Parallel. To them, yeah. You may also hear something of a parallel to Jesus' own resurrected activity. In the book of John, you have Jesus returning, being resurrected, and breathing on the disciples and saying, receive the Spirit. As he breathes on them, you can hear something of an echo there as well. Now, this isn't the time to go in depth to that, but I want you to know that these things they've already been set up in to some extent. This is not something that just happens out of the absolute sheer blue with no existing idea or notion. Yes, it appears to be a new movement on God's part, but it's not new at all. This has been the way that it was going to be from the beginning in God's plan. So suddenly there came from heaven is the major point, I think, to be understood here. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. Remember what Pentecost is. It is that first fruits. It's the second celebration of the first fruits. First fruits of barley was associated with the Passover. The first fruits of the wheat harvest, the second harvest, if you will, but the first fruits of the second harvest is in the Pentecost. And so now, having this Pentecost experience there, when the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place, naturally, and suddenly there came from heaven. The source of this is, I think, going to be a major part that needs to be understood. That's the undergirding of the event that's happening here. This is not something that happened from the earth, in the earth, by the earth, to the earth, through the earth. This is not just purely something natural. It's not at all. It's precisely supernatural. They come from heaven.
I just wanted to interject. Acts chapter 1 verse 15 says, during these days Peter stood up among the brothers. The numbers there were about 120. So this is the initial church. The gathered ones who believed there was something more that God was going to do for them. The believers, the initial gathering of believers. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it comes from heaven, and it's a noise. There is a noise, and it's like the noise of a violent rushing wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. This is God, if you will, setting his garrison. There are enemy forces at work, and this is the initial move. Having inaugurated his reign and rule, he is now setting in motion the first real sortie, if you will. And Peter is about to go out and claim some lives, is what he's going to do. Now, you may also remember that there are, from the Old Testament, when you hear the sound of the rushing wind in the trees, you'll know that the Lord is at work in his military might to do the victory. Well, there is a sound like a violent rushing wind which is filling the whole house. And what we have is that the Lord is setting his garrison. He's getting ready to do something in military terms. He's going to make a claim for himself, and he is going to, again, in terms, claim some lives. So then there appeared to them tongues as of fire, distributing themselves, and they rested on each one of them. Again, this is a direct activity of God, and so I think that we really need to see this as being a counter-temple movement, because this is not in the temple. This is just simply where there's a gathered set of believers. The building itself, and whether it's the upper room or not, I don't know if we have a specific statement about that, but it's been called that by several different people as it gets passed down. But wherever it is that they are, the where is not nearly so important as it is the who. It is where is this the source of all of this from heaven. It is the to whom, those who are the believers, those who are the ones that were assigned to be still and wait and see what's going to happen, because you're going to receive power, and then we're going to send out this sortie, and then you will go, and you will conquer to the ends of the earth. Conquer is my word to try to get at the heart of what it is that's going on here. And we don't do it with machetes, and we don't do it with spears, and we don't do it with the Gatling gun and all that good business. We do it with the gospel. We do it with the sword, the word of the Lord, and we go out and we claim for the Lord the world which belongs to him. It's his. And so this is an initial move. This is one of the first movements that's taking place here. And again, it's supernatural. This is not something where people were going out and Peter was super convincing, and because of his super ability to sell the goods and close the deal and be really convincing. No. This is an activity of the Holy Spirit from front to back.
And going a little further, just in the description, again, this is a spiritual analogy of what's happening, but it's a descriptor of the physical events happening. So these cloven, as the many older translation would have said, a split, divided tongues of fire. In that, it's not meaning double-speeched or the forked tongue, as in a serpent or whatever, but it is meaning, I believe there is a small representation of the actual speech that will happen, because these people, as this happens, we read only a couple verses to follow this, they begin to speak in languages that they did not know. They could speak their own language, yes. They could tell of God, yes, in their own language. But all of a sudden, supernaturally, they were given the gift of speaking another language, and which was an intelligible human spoken language. So you have these two tongues of fire, the fire representing the Spirit, so to speak, as in the empowerment, the power of God, the might of God, as many times the Spirit might be portrayed as fire.
Yes.
Again, back to John the Baptist, baptizing you with the Spirit and fire. So here you have this representation of fire and tongues in the literal tongue, and I'm wrapping it up here.
Good.
I'm going to cut you loose.
You're good. You're good.
The literal tongue of what they could speak, and then what they couldn't naturally. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, as you were talking about John the Baptist, I want to say that John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah. Elijah was the prophet of fire. You know, he called down fire. He was taken up. He had the chariots of fire would come, and there's much more to be said with that. But the following in the train of Elijah comes John the Baptist. John the Baptist then making mention and speaking towards this, and then the events happening. Not only that, but also going further back into the book of Numbers, where we see Moses when he is told by God to, what would be the word there, to get together various leaders. Moses himself was not going to be the singular, the only, he's going to be the head, but he wasn't going to be like the only source of wisdom and knowledge and understanding and all that. They were going to get these 70 to gather together. And what happens when he does that, God says that he's going to put the Spirit that's on Moses, he's going to put it on these other 70 folks. Well, what happens at that point in time? Numbers 11 is where this starts to take place. Verse 25, Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him,
Yes.
and he took of the Spirit who was upon him and placed him upon the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not do it again. But 2 men had remained in the camp. The name of the one was Eldad, and the name of the other was Medad, and the Spirit rested upon them. Now they were among those who had been registered, but had not gone out to the tent, and they prophesied in the camp too. They prophesied as well. And so then a young man ran and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the attendant of Moses, from his youth he comes and says, Moses, my Lord, restrained them. But Moses said, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. The word among there is really important, but we'll talk on that perhaps at another time when we're going over the book of Numbers. But
Yes.
what we're getting at is now at this point, the Spirit has come, and there is an amongness, and no longer is it just a prophesying that goes out one time and they did not do it again. This is the Holy Spirit that comes on them, remains on them, and the power is continuous.
And unlike the 2 that were remaining, the 120 in the upper room did not have to stay there to be in the realm of blessing of God. It was to disperse them, whereas the intention of the 2 that remained of the 70, they had to remain in that one locale. They had the loci of the tent of meeting to remain in that blessing, in that power. And Moses said, I wish everybody, I would to God that everybody would want to remain here. And it happens in Acts chapter 2, led up to by Acts chapter 1, of course, successfully.
Do we need to call timeout?
We can call timeout. Sure. Timeout.
Timeout.
Take 1.
All right.
How are you, Brother Kevin?
Boy,
Yeah, we're taping a teaching.
we were all the way up until you come with that really smart car.
I tried to